So glad you're tuning in, and I'm so excited for this day. I have been waiting for this day to come for longer than I care to talk about. It's really been, the Healing Grove has really been in the making for the last couple of years, and I'm just beyond thrilled that it's actually happening. And of course, as with any new thing, you think you have everything, tied down the night before, and then poof, there's a bunch of glitches. So I'm hopeful that this is actually streaming. And either way, it's definitely going to be recorded. So I'm going to go through some introductory things today, including some teaching on the model of complexity that I think is going to be very helpful for you to look at and embrace while you're dealing with the Healing Grove offering this week. So before we get started, if you could comment in the Facebook group, just go to our Facebook group, the Healing Grove Community Week, or the Healing Grove Community. It is a private group, but once you answer the questions, you'll automatically be allowed to join. If you haven't gotten in right away, it's probably because you didn't answer the questions. So go back and redo that if you would. And once you've done that, you'll be on the Facebook page and you'll be able to watch this there as well. So feel free to comment there. Let us know that you're here. I see people chiming in now from Philadelphia and Fresno. Wonderful. So happy that you guys made it. So let me start by introducing myself. Some of you know me and others of you don't know me and have never heard of me, have no idea what I'm up to. So I'm Kristin Reihman. I'm a family doctor. I'm a board certified family practice doctor. I'm also an integrative specialist. So I've done a lot of learning and research and using a lot of integrative tools and holistic methods, including functional medicine, including acupuncture. I'm an acupuncturist as well by training. And I use all these different tools and mindsets and approaches to bear on the care I bring to my patients. I used also all of these tools, or at least the ones I had collected up until 2011, when I myself went down hard with Lyme disease. I didn't know it was Lyme disease at the time. In retrospect, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. But one of the things I'm going to talk about today is what happens when you're in the throes of any kind of healing journey that doesn't make sense, that doesn't have a label, that doesn't give you the kind of validation of having a lab test come back positive to tell you, yes, this is exactly what you have. That's what a lot of my patients are dealing with. It's what I was dealing with to some extent. And I've done a lot of thinking on how to wrangle with those types of problems and syndromes. So I'll tell you about me. My story is that when I was in my early 40s, I had just graduated from residency. I was very excited to take on a teaching job in my hospital system where I'd trained. And I had a lot of friends and relationships and patients, long-term patients who I'd been seeing there. I was working in the inner city. I was delivering babies. I was facilitating prenatal groups, which I loved, and facilitating an acupuncture group with my dear friends, Drs. Ina Grundman and Christiane Hines and Abby Letcher. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful time of working in a community that really needed help and getting to serve in that way and use all of my tools in my toolbox. Well, that all came to a screeching halt in 2011, about 9 months into my faculty position. I became severely ill from Lyme disease. In fact, a tick bit me. Many people who get Lyme disease don't have a tick bite history. They don't even have an insect bite history, even though any insect can carry Lyme, it turns out. Or they don't remember it. But for me, I definitely had a tick bite and I spiraled down into a deep, dark, debilitating, I lost 30 pounds. I was too weak to pick up my baby, who was 1 at the time. Couldn't get out of bed for months, like 3 months. My brain just didn't work. I couldn't remember how to do math. I couldn't remember that my key was in my car in the driveway with my car still running. It was bad. It was really bad. If any of you out there are struggling with that level of debility, I feel you. In fact, if you're out there and you're feeling overwhelmed because you're in a healing crisis right now, I want you to put that in the chat, in the Facebook group, so we can love you up. Just say, I'm struggling, or I hear you, or I've been there. Let us know how we can support you. Because it can be really lonely and it can feel really invalidating, right? So that's where I was. And, it wasn't like there was one thing that happened that healed me, because obviously I'm healed. Like I'm 50 as of last week and I feel awesome and I have lots of energy now and Occasionally I might get a Lyme symptom start to creep back if I don't follow my routine and don't do my yoga and don't do my healthy eating and all the other things that I learned through that experience. But yeah, it was a really, really rough time. And I honestly look back at it and it felt like a near-death experience. And it wasn't until a homeopathic family doctor and friend said to me, you know, are you trying to live or are you trying to die? Because it makes every bit of difference in terms of how I support you on this journey. Right? That I was like, holy, that's the real question, right? Because that's what it felt like. It felt like I had already begun the process. I mean, my family was basically already processing my death. You know, they'd gone on without me. They weren't needing me anymore. My husband was doing everything. My kids were stepping up. My kids were at the time 1, 4, 7, and 10. And they were going on without me. And so I went home that night and I lay in my bed, which is where I lived at that point, and I thought about this and I thought, well, okay, that's clearly an important decision if there ever was one to make. My body does feel like it's trying to die. I feel like I have to like coax myself into taking a breath. And I lay there with that decision hanging over me and I said, well, I don't even know how to make that decision. Like, how do you make that decision? I mean, I think the right answer is I'm supposed to want to live, but honestly, I'm not really feeling it. You know, in the chat right now, if you've ever felt like I'm not even sure, I've definitely hear you. There's been times where I'm not even sure I wanted to live. I get it. Like I was totally there too. And it sucked. So lying there in bed that night, I was like, well, do I want to live or do I want to die? How do I make any decision, right? The way I make decisions personally is I think about the choice in front of me. I pick one side and then the other, and I just kind of imagine myself on that road until I get a very strong feeling. You know, I might cry or I might be like, yeah, that's clearly it. Like I use my emotions as kind of a rudder to guide me, which is when we talk about complexity, I'm going to get into how that can be very useful. But I didn't have a strong feeling of like, yeah, I want to live, which was surprising. I mean, I guess the only emotion I had was, that's kind of interesting. I wonder what it's going to feel like when I say, I want to die or I choose death. Again, not a strong feeling. It was just sort of like, well, yeah, you could choose death. You're already kind of there. Your family's worked through it pretty much. You know, your work has gone on without you. People are filling in for you. And so I moved on to, well, I could live. And I didn't have a strong feeling, but the second I said that to myself, I could live, I had this powerful clarity, like this deep knowing that just came to my awareness for the first time, which said, yeah, you could live, but if you live, you are not sticking around for any fear, bullshit, not becoming the doctor you're meant to be, inauthenticity. Like you're sticking around for bouncing on trampolines with your kids. You're sticking around for saving the planet in whatever way that is meaningful or practical for you. And you're sticking around for life and love. Like anything on the spectrum from like neutral to bliss, like that's what you're hanging around for. There's no more dabbling in like fear and despair and whatevs. Like that's over. And I was like, interesting. Okay, well, those are the terms of the agreement, it seems like. And then I went to sleep because I still didn't have a clear decision. So the next morning I got up, same deal. I woke up and I was like, okay, well, I don't have a feeling about this yet. So what's it going to be? I could live, I could die. Again, I'm not feeling it. All of a sudden I was like, out of my bed. And my body was like moving. And I was in 10 out of 10 pain. I mean, the reason I was in my bed was because I was in 10 out of 10 pain all the time when I was vertical. Horizontal, it all went away, which was super interesting, I thought. Vertical, 10 out of 10 pain. Like it was like my body was screaming at me, do not be upright, do not be upright. Lie down or we're going to kill you with this pain. So I was like now moving through that 10 out of 10 pain. And I was like, okay, this really hurts. But for some reason I'm moving. And my whole day was like that. I mean, first thing I went downstairs and I sat at the breakfast table and there was breakfast there by the other adult who'd been doing everything. And I ate that breakfast and I was like, this is really interesting. I'm sitting upright at the island on a stool with really terrible back pain and I'm eating breakfast. That's new. And the next thing I knew, I was like going downstairs to the basement where we have this endless pool and I was swimming in an endless pool with 10 out of 10 pain. And I was like, this is really fascinating. How did I even get in here? It's like totally not even to code. And I'm somehow in this pool without having killed myself. I'm so debilitated and I'm swimming. Okay. And the next thing I knew, I was bumping along on the little bus to my physical therapy, which was in hot water and, you know, working down the street with some people. And I got home from that on the little bus. And I walked out of the bus and went to my garden mindlessly. Like I was kind of a zombie. People who remember me then, you know who you are. I was kind of like a zombie. Someone said to me, it's almost like there's a vampire sucking your life out of you. And I was like, ooh, it must be creepy to be around. But that's how it was. It was bad. And I got into the garden and the next thing I knew, I was like, wow, I'm sitting in the garden looking at my redbud tree and it's in bloom. Holy crow, it's April or whenever it was. Whoa. And then I was like, this is not how dying people behave. This must be my body choosing life. And that's what it was for me. And I would like to say that the second I knew it was me choosing life, I was instantly healed. Totally wasn't like that. It was a 2-year climb out of that hole. And it took changing a lot of things. It took intentionally changing a lot of things, including cleaning up my diet to heal my gut, doing my first elimination diet to reduce inflammation, bring my immune system back online. But it also took getting out of, you know, toxic environments, removing myself from my workplace where there were a lot of unhealthy relationships and a lot of lack of integrity on my part. Like I was peddling medicines and following guidelines that no longer felt like they were serving my patients. You know, they were getting to a diagnosis for sure, really effectively and efficiently, and really, you know, easily able to name like the drug that went along with that problem. But it felt like a lot of band-aids and not a lot of really honoring that there was a bigger healing story at work here, and we were missing the boat. And it didn't feel good to practice medicine in that way. But most of all, I think what it took for me, and this was a lesson that kept on kind of knocking on my door until I really embraced it for about 2.5 years, which was changing from this modus that I'd always been in my whole life, which said, you know, you're here to heal the world, girlfriend. And I know it's a big task, but you're a rock star and you can do it. And then I couldn't. So it took really letting go of that and embracing another mentality, which said, if I can only heal myself, like that would be enough. So I'm obviously still working on that one. And the Healing Grove is my attempt to not do it alone anymore. It's my fondest wish for everyone on the planet to have access to easy, simple, safe, effective, and potentially life-changing tools so that you have in your medicine cabinet, in your back pocket, in your household, in your armamentarium, whether it's physical or emotional or spiritual or mental, you have the tools you need to stay optimally well if you're already there, or to climb out of a hole if you're in one of those two. So that's why I created the Healing Grove. I wanted to bring in all of my teachers, all of my mentors, all of the people that I learned from during that time and have been learning from since, some of whom I've only met in the last year, who are tremendous, all of whom have real tremendously important gifts and tools, whether they're physical practical tools, whether they're practices that you can learn, or whether they're mindset shifts. I want to share them with you. So if you're excited to learn from some of these people, put a comment in the Facebook group and tell us about it. Tell us what you're hoping to learn here. While you're doing that, I'm going to share my screen so we can talk about something called the Kynefin framework. All right, give me a thumbs up if you've heard of the Kynefin framework. Bonus points. I don't expect anyone's ever heard of this, by the way. It's not like you're out of the loop if you've never heard of the Kynefin framework. Okay, so this is a very busy slide. I want you not to freak out about it or not even look at it yet, really. You can, if you want, you can hang out in disorder, which is actually where most of us spend most of our lives. Okay, and I'm going to explain this whole slide in a second, so don't get bent out of shape yet. This concept, the Kynefin framework, is actually a model for understanding different types of problems, whether they're problems in business, problems in relationships, just problems with your computer, problems with your health. It's been used all over the place. It was invented by a guy in 1999 whose name was Dave Snowden. He worked at IBM. And at the time, he was looking for a way to teach about how to handle the different kinds of problems that come up in that industry. Like I said, it's since been exported everywhere. I learned about it in the concept. I learned about it in the context of learning from the art of hosting people who are leading transformative conversations to change the world. But all that doesn't matter. What matters are the 5 words in the middle. So take a look at the middle word, which is disorder, and then kind of look at the red words around it. You'll see simple, complicated, complex, and chaos. So simple, complicated, complex, and chaos are the 4 basic types of problems. And I'll get into what roadmaps there are to navigate those problems once you know what type of problem you're in. Disorder is that kind of squishy place in the middle where you don't really know what's going on. Disorder was where I was for the several weeks leading up to my tick bite before I was ill, because interestingly enough, believe this or not, my Lyme symptoms began before the tick bite. And that has to do with the fact that I had residual Lyme in my body from 7 or 8 years prior that was beginning to reactivate. The tick bite just like sealed the deal. It was almost like I was looking for some clarity. I even remember one day asking, you know what, I need some clarity on this. I need to know for sure this is Lyme before I wean my 1-year-old and get on a strong antibiotic, which at the time was the only tool in my toolbox to deal with this. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm so unsure. I don't want to wean my kid out of fear. Maybe I just need another tick bite and a clear rash in order to believe myself, trust my own body enough to take some treatment for this, to wean my kid, to get on doxy, etc. And 3 days later, I pulled a tick off my butt. And a couple days after that, I had a big bullseye rash, which is indicative that yes, you got Lyme, or you're activating some Lyme from before. And then I had a terrible illness. So be careful what you ask for is rule number 1. Rule number 2 is that place that I was in beforehand, I didn't know what kind of problem I had. I just knew I was waking up every morning with terrible pain and not being able to sleep well and just felt exhausted all the time. Those were Lyme symptoms reactivating before I got the second tick bite. And that was me in disorder. So let's talk about simple problems. Simple problems are what we all hope for, okay? They're problems that we know right off the bat what causes them, what to do about them, and they always respond when you take care of them. So a simple problem might be in an otherwise healthy person, they skip 3 nights of sleep in a row because they're working late, maybe because they're pulling all-nighters for papers they're writing in college, maybe because they have a deadline in their job and they're just working all the time. They don't sleep. So 3 days later, they look like, death warmed over, and everybody would agree, well, this person has a simple problem, right? They skipped their sleep. They're now exhausted. Maybe they have pain all over their body. Maybe they have other symptoms, but it's pretty clear what's happening because of the timeline and how it came upon them, and also how healthy they were before. Simple. They get sleep, it gets better, boom. That was a simple problem, okay? Complicated problems are a little more, complicated. They're kind of like, if you imagine several simple problems stacked together that you must do in a certain order or with a certain algorithm. But in the end, if you follow all the steps, you get to where you're going. So the roadmap for a simple problem, if I back up, is sense what the situation is. I'm tired. Categorize the situation into a known bucket, meaning put a label on it. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. And then respond with a well-known solution that's known to work. Get your damn sleep, right? If it doesn't get better, it wasn't a simple problem. Or you categorized it wrong, right? So complicated problems, the roadmap is slightly different. Rather than sense the problem right away, you do sense the problem right away, as with a simple problem. But number 2, rather than categorize it into a known bucket, you need to analyze the problem and figure out what your options are, because there are usually more than one for a complicated problem. A complicated problem might have several different kinds of pathways or algorithms, but they all lead to a predictable result. Okay, so the common situation between a simple and a complicated problem is that they're known problems and there are known solutions. Everybody who comes to me with Lyme disease, who's been sick for more than 6 months, wants it to be a simple problem. They want to come and just get an antibiotic and get better. I get it, believe me. I wish that were the case for Lyme, but it's not usually the case. Some people recognize that it's complicated. They've gotten over that hurdle of wanting it to be simple. And they're like, I know it's complicated, but I'm hiring you as an expert. I know you have the one path, right? And I have to say, I don't have a one path, because there's not one path, because it turns out Lyme and so many other problems that we see today in our modern society, including fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, migraine headaches, food allergies, all these common things, a lot of skin issues, psoriasis. Sure, some of those fall into simple and complicated, because if you treat them the way you think is the one way to treat them, some of those do get better. The same is true for Lyme. Some people will get better with a round of antibiotics and never experience their symptoms again. Good for those people. That's not the people who show up in my clinic. It's not the people who tend to follow me, because I have a different set of tools. And the people who come to me have tried the simple approach. They've tried the complicated approach, and now they're looking for something else. So let's talk about how to approach a complex problem. Now, if you're sitting there going, I don't have fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue or Lyme disease or anything that's going on, I would ask, well, what do you have? And have you treated it like a simple problem, and has it gotten better? Or have you treated it like a complicated problem and it got better? If so, awesome for you. I think you'll still find a lot to learn in the Healing Grove. But the complex people are really going to value this, because this is an important piece that you need to understand about wrangling with a complex issue. Complex issues do have underlying causes, usually more than one, but those causes are not known up front. We can't just classify them and put them in a bucket, diagnose them and treat them, because we don't know what they are up front. And so the first thing you do when you have a complex problem, or any problem that hasn't gotten better with the Western medicine Band-Aid, or the expensive consult that led you through lots of days of chelation or years of chelation or whatever, is that you're dealing with a complex problem. And so you need to probe the known universe to gather as much information as possible to then consider as potential experiments for yourself. Now, when I say experiments for yourself, I don't mean just willy-nilly start trying things. I mean really put on your scientist hat and be willing to engage with a problem in a rigorous way. And if your brain's not working enough to do that, this is where you need a healing team. You need to have other people who are on this journey with you, who can help you sort out, does this thing seem safe? Does it have a good track record for people like you? What are the results you're seeing? Did you seem better yesterday? Did your brain work better yesterday? Or were you having less pain last week? Because there's so many complicating features in a complex illness that it's easy to forget how something is working for you. But the first step is always you probe. You look around, you listen to people at support groups, you come to places like the Healing Grove, or you listen to the online Summit Land, and you listen for things that resonate with you, right? Now, I will stop right here and say, this approach is not very well validated, meaning you're not going to get a lot of people saying, oh, that's a great approach, go experiment on yourself. But I'm telling you, this is what it looks like. This is actually what people do who end up getting better from complex, chronic, baffling mystery illness. It's what I did with my Lyme illness. It's what all my patients end up doing, minus the 2 or 3% who just come in and need antibiotics and they're done. Good for you. But everyone else really needs to embrace this. Okay, so you're probing, you're figuring out what you need. Maybe you're making a list in your notebook about, wow, that person talked about a Rife machine. That sounds interesting. I have to look into that. Or that person's using herbs. Or this person is trying a new form of exercise that is really strengthening their core, which is leading to less back pain. I got to look into that. Okay, so you're kind of collecting. You're becoming a collector. Second step in a complexity problem is you figure out what you're going to dive into, and you do some experiments. You figure out what your next steps are. I'm a big fan of massive self-experimentation, but always within a safe confine, meaning you're picking things that are safe to fail, meaning if they fail, they're not going to hurt you. You wouldn't have wasted the next year of your health trying something. So you need to do enough research and vetting to make sure that it's safe to fail, safe to try. And then you need to pay attention to what the results are, right? You have to say, what data is coming out of this? How am I doing with this thing I'm trying? And then you got to respond to that new information. Wow, I tried getting more sleep than I normally get. I'm usually a 9-hour girl, but when I was sick from Lyme, I was sleeping 12 hours a night. So there's a part of me that could have been like, who are you to sleep 12 hours a night? You got too much work to do. You can't, that's ridiculous, right? That's my mind getting involved. But if I embrace that that's actually working, that experiment is actually working for me, then guess what? I can do more of what works, less of what doesn't work, and focus my energies on those little mini experiments that are actually slowly but surely bringing me back to vitality. So my strong recommendation for you, which is not medical advice, because nothing in the Healing Grove is medical advice. I'm not your doctor, you're not my patient. I'm just a friend here on a path, a fellow friend on a journey who's sharing some hard-won knowledge. And that knowledge is this: you're surrounded by people with great ideas who want to help you. In the Healing Grove, that's even more true, okay? So use this week as your time to check things out. Listen to this person, listen to that person, make some comments in the Facebook group, ask for help, ask for people to suggest a video for what you're dealing with. They'll guide you. You'll say, you know what, I'm really looking for someone who talks about the emotional underpinnings of migraines, or the emotional connection to skin conditions. Chances are someone else in the Grove has already watched the video that will direct you to that person, okay? So please reach out, ask for help, use us as your team this week. We're here for you. And embrace the fact that we're all in complexity together. I mean, this year more than ever, I feel like I've been swimming upstream in my medical profession for the last 10 years, and suddenly we're all in the same boat with this COVID thing, right? COVID is nothing if not complex. It's a novel coronavirus, which means by definition, we have no idea what kind of problem it is, right? Is it a simple problem? Turns out not so simple, right? The testing's inaccurate in many people. When it's available, the bug seems to change and morph and do completely different things in everybody that it touches. Not a simple problem. Is it complicated? Well, it would be grand if it turns out to be complicated, right? Because that would mean there would be a bunch of experts who got perfect results every time, who we could just pay money or read online about and do their thing, and it would work for everybody, okay? That doesn't seem to be happening either. So right now we're still kind of in disorder, but chances are COVID is a complex illness. It certainly is going to be complex in my mind until someone comes out with some treatments that we can then shift it over to the complicated frame. So before we stop, I want to talk a little bit about chaos, okay? So chaos is that not so fun part of this diagram that many of us with complex illnesses have been to, and even people who haven't been sick physically with a complex illness have experienced chaos in their lives. In the chart here, it says, this is when all hell breaks loose. Okay, for people in my Lyme practice, for example, many of them come to me saying, I'm really afraid of treating it because every time I get on this herb or that antibiotic or this other therapy, I have such a bad reaction. I have so many more symptoms. In Lyme world, we call that a Herxheimer reaction, when your body or some other thing starts to kill the bacteria and it releases a bunch of toxins and you have bigger inflammation for a while. So a Herxheimer is kind of a chaos narrative, unless you quickly sense the problem as in a complicated situation, analyze it, figure out what to do, and then respond with a plan that works. Often the first time people have this happen to them, though, they don't have a plan. And so it's chaotic for them. And they realize that all they want to do is just get the hell out of Dodge, like make sure these symptoms end as soon as possible. And so the steps in chaos are act, just act, trust your instinct, just do something, get out of there, get out of the danger zone. You know, chaos is when You're walking across the street with a small child and suddenly someone runs a red light and even though you have the right of way, they're coming at you. Like you don't think, you grab that child and pull it out of the way, right? You're in a chaos situation in that moment. Sensing what to do to get out of the immediate danger actually comes afterwards, because then you're like, okay, we're out of the danger. What do we do next, right? How do we reboot from that? I get to the sidewalk with my child. I make sure he's fine. I didn't rip his arm out of his socket. You know, I try to breathe deeply to lower my heart rate so I don't project my fear onto my child, and so on. We make a next move. And then we respond. We try to take action to make sure that never happens again, okay? So for people who come to me saying, every time I treat with this or that thing for Lyme, for example, I have a huge herx and I can't get out of bed for a week. And I'm like, well, clearly we don't want to go there, right? We don't ever want to do that again, because for God's sakes, you've suffered enough. We don't need to add to your suffering just to prove to ourselves that we're killing bugs and we're on the right path. So we'll put in more binders. We'll help people with their detoxification pathways. We'll do less killing of bugs and more detox and drainage to try to find a better balance, so that when we are doing our mini experiments, we're not hurting anybody. Because remember, it always goes back to, you want to use things that are safe, not going to hurt you, could be helpful to you, and pay attention to whether you made the right call, whether you did enough or not enough detoxification while you were killing Lyme. So I hope this is making sense. If it is, go to the Facebook group and post so that we know you're on track. Just say, got it, it's making sense, I hear you. If you have questions, put them there and I will find them after this and I'll get back to you. So I think that's enough of the Kynefin model. Thank you to Dave Snowden again for breaking it down for me. It's what I was doing for many years anyway, because even before I got Lyme, the people who came to me were the people who were struggling with complex things. And looking back, it's like my patients found me even before I had the tools to help them, but I was cultivating the process that would allow us to sit with that uncertainty together and to navigate it with grace and ease, as opposed to always feeling like we're in a chaos narrative. So I hope this has been helpful to you. Let me know if so in the Facebook group. So the last thing I want to share with you guys is how this all relates to the Healing Grove. I've sort of hinted at it. If you've watched the welcome video, you know that I created the Grove with this intention to have a big tree in the middle. You know, in my original concept of it, each of my speakers would be like little birdhouses hanging on the different trees, and you could enter the birdhouse and like see their website and see their offering and their gift and listen to their talk. And of course that was going to be like $5 million. So it ended up not happening exactly that way, but I'm still really happy with how it did turn out, because everything is there for you. At the bottom of the page, if you scroll down to Grove Resources, you'll find the different branches of our healing tree, right? We all have a social branch. We all have an emotional branch or limb of our tree. We all have a conceptual or thinking branch. I was telling you earlier about how, you know, in chaos, or in disorder, we're often stressing and wondering about, what does this mean that I can't figure this out? And a lot of my own suffering during the aftermath of my initial chaos narrative as I was recovering was, you know, self-inflicted, because in my mind, I just kept saying, why can't I get better? I feel like I've done everything I need to do. And I've clearly made a choice to live. I've taken those steps. I'm only agreeing to do things that are cultivating neutral to bliss, right? And getting me on track to jump on trampolines again. And I'm changing my practice, right? I changed my practice so that I wasn't doing everything that I'd been doing before. I was only focusing on those things where I could do it as a team and I could really channel the tools that I thought were most useful for people. But yet I wasn't better. And my mind was doing a lot with me every day, flogging me, you know, like, why don't you know this? You should know this. Like, you're purporting to teach people how to heal from Lyme and you're still having pain. Like, what the heck? That wasn't helpful, it turns out. In fact, it made it a lot harder and a lot worse. And it took me a lot longer, I think, than if I just embraced that I was in complexity and I didn't have to know the answers. I had a really wonderful doctor friend tell me once, she heard my whole story, and I said to her, you know, the hardest part about this is that I feel like I've learned everything I have to know. Like, I know what I'm being called to do as a physician. I know how I'm being used by God or the universe or the divine or whatever. I just know that I'm on path to serve the world in this way. And yet I'm still in pain. Like, I'm still lying down for 10 minutes in between every patient, like on the floor, dropping and just lying down, you know, at the grocery store. And I don't understand. And she turned to me like she did that. She was like driving and she turned to me and she was like, what makes you so important, Kristin Reihman, that you get to know why you're suffering? And I was like, whoa, you're right. You're right. Maybe I don't get to know. Maybe that's part of what I needed to learn, is to give up control over understanding. And if that makes me weak or not rigorous or an incompetent doctor, like, so be it, because I just want to be free of this pain. I need to be over this illness. And it wasn't like boom, immediate, but it was definitely the beginning of another shift, another up-leveling in my health and my wellness journey. So I hope this has been helpful to you. I would love to hear about your takeaways from this conversation in the Facebook group. In future conversations, we're going to do this every day for, at 11 o'clock, we'll go as long as it feels right to go, for up to an hour. And I'm hopeful that you will join me here and ask your questions and connect with one another. And if you see someone else's story or words in the Facebook chat, and they seem to be needing a friend or a word of encouragement, I hope you'll provide that. This Facebook group is just one aspect of the Healing Grove. Obviously, all the resources live on the Grove itself, but you can always link into Facebook there. And I encourage you to check it at least once a day. And before you put any kind of post for yourself, just read through a few comments and see if there's anyone out there who looks like they're in need of support, because that's how this thing becomes really beautiful and supportive and generative. You give before you get, right? So get on there, give a few positive comments to others on their journey, and share a little bit about yourself then and what you're looking to receive. And hopefully it'll all come back to you tenfold. All right, everyone, have a fabulous day. Check your email tomorrow. I'll be sending out a chapter from my ebook, which is the chapter on complexity, just so you can review what we talked about today and use it as you structure your path through the Healing Grove. Enjoy the rest of your day.